November of 1942, we will see our first action in a place called North Africa. Okay? Now, it's at the end of 1942 that Winston Churchill once again braves the Atlantic and is invited by President Roosevelt to address both houses of Congress, in which Churchill said, "This is not the end. This is not the beginning of the end, but it is perhaps the end of the beginning. This is not the end. This is not the beginning of the end, but it is perhaps the end of the beginning." So he gave that speech at the end of 1942. Okay? So as we progress, I talked about the Atlantic Charter earlier on, where Churchill and Roosevelt met the first time in Nova Scotia up in Newfoundland. And they said, once the United States gets in the war, we're going to focus on what first? Which theater? The European theater rather than the Pacific theater. Okay? And as we begin to focus on the European theater, guys, the biggest issue we have is supply lines. We've got to be able to get our supplies across the Atlantic, because pretty soon, guys, those supplies going across the Atlantic are going to be our young men. Those are going to be our troops. And if we can't safely deliver them across the Atlantic, we're in trouble. And if we can't supply them once they get there, we're in trouble. So what we will ensue is the Battle of the Atlantic. Okay? And that's where we go with this slide. See, because you got the water in the background. The Battle of the Atlantic. Okay. Thematic. Thematic. Yes, graphic design. Okay. So what we saw here, guys, is we're going to do some subhunting. We got to find these U-boats. We got to find these U-boats and take them out. Okay? So, from mid-42 to mid-43 is going to be the kind of the peak of this. All right? So the German subs, which traveled in wolf packs, all right? If you go back to old World War II cartoons, and I don't know if you've ever seen any of these, a lot of them are banned because they're politically incorrect, very politically, especially towards the Japanese, okay? But the Germans were often portrayed, Hitler was often portrayed as a wolf. You know the Three Little Pigs? I'm going to huff and puff and blow your house down type of thing, right? Bugs Bunny cartoons, these sorts of things. They're classic, okay? And I actually have a disc of those that some of them are banned, but it's in a format that is old, so I don't think it'll play on my computer anymore. It's like from the 80s or something. Sam! Because they're politically incorrect. The way they portray the Japanese, yes, they're racist. Okay? Now, should we erase history because it's racist? Or should we learn from it? I'm not going to erase it. Okay? Now, I might not be able to play it because it doesn't work. But. All right. So look at this, guys. In May of 1942 alone, 120 merchant ships were sunk in the Atlantic. These are our ships. All right. So this is going to threaten food and weapon supplies. So, guys, this is why smart people, again, are important. We got to figure out a way, guys. This is about survival. So where there's a will, there's a way. And so, like in the Battle of Britain, where is my mouse? There you are. We are going to develop sonar, sound navigation, and ranging. Told you we were going to be talking about this, Ash, right? Now, it kind of works like this. I don't know if you've ever had a teacher that had notes like this kind of like interactive action in your notes. So, if you've ever watched a submarine movie, they send out sound waves through the water. It's usually like a ping. So it's like, boom, boom, right? And then it goes out, it hits an object and reverberates back. And you pick it up. That sound wave, okay? Could it hit a whale? Yes. I'm sure there were many whales destroyed.
Oh my God. Wait, they get, is it not, wait. Oh, that's so, oh.
I'm sure there were
I
many
know.
whales.
Especially the belugas, right? All right, so this is called echo ranging, okay? Now, we know like dolphins do this, right? Yes. So this is going to be good. This is going to help us, okay? So now we can figure out where these subs are, even if they're submerged, okay? Now, once you find the location of one of these subs, how do you take it out? Okay, you could use torpedoes or depth charges, okay? Now, torpedoes, you kind of got to be pretty accurate, okay? And then with depth charges, you can launch a bunch of them, all right? And you can set the depth charges to go off at a certain depth, okay? So your sonar will tell you about what depth they're at, and then you just throw a bunch of those over the side of the destroyer. They sink to that depth, and boom. Now, do you have to have a direct hit? No. You guys have all been swimming in 10 feet water, right, where you dive at the bottom of the deep end and your ears start to feel the pressure. There's a lot of pressure under that, right? So if you get a large explosion underwater like that, and it's close to a sub, it can crack the hull of a sub. And if a cracked hull of a sub, what's that sub got to do? It's got to surface. And when you have a surface submarine, that's a sitting duck. Yes? Or a lame duck. Okay, this is kind of what it would look like. Okay, this is actually from a video game. All right, but these are depth charges here. Okay.
Are you on level 1?
Wait, so are these the things from Finding Nemo?
Oh, I'm sorry. I mean, I remember watching that movie.
They just look like it.
Oh, the big things on the chain?
Yeah.
Those were underwater.
Wait, there was mines in Nemo?
Yeah, remember?
Do you think there's going to be a whale that comes in and hits the whale? Like,
And it's all those mines.
yeah, they smell the blood. He's like, hungry now. But that movie confused me. It's some of these little things you don't understand.
Oh, like when you were younger.
Well, like,
Oh, bull crap.
yeah, sure.
Oh no, they got rid of the flash players.
They did.
Yeah.
Who did?
So all of the new like updates got rid of flash players, so you can't play flash games anymore.
Yeah, we just
Oh.
skip it.
Actually, you can. You just have to download
Flash
it.
is like a certain format of like video games. You know, like all those
How am I
Like
supposed to
Squid
explain
Play.
video games,
Yeah.
like the typing games and stuff like that. Those are all made using Flash.
Oh,
And the new browser
No.
support it.
There it is. Oh, well, I have a video.
Go ahead. I played full map game or since then.
Yeah, that's it.
Fireboy and Mama Girl.
Ooh, yeah.
Or whatever.
So this is like more recent, but. Okay.
You sat on top of this.
Oh, you're fast.
That'd be so fun.
Oh, that'd be exciting.
You died.
Okay, so this is a sitting duck, okay? And this is another picture of what it looks like, okay? So a depth charge kind of you guys have probably never seen one of these before. A keg of beer.
Yeah.
Never.
Oh, yeah, you've never seen one. It's kind of like the size of a keg of beer, right? And you launch these off the back of a destroyer, and they sink to that depth and hopefully get close enough. This guy's doing some sub hunting, okay? So you can see they've dropped quite a few depth charges here, okay? So this was really effective. The sonar really helped. And this is a huge part of winning the war. If we can't get our supplies across, our troops across, guys, this is going to make things a lot more difficult. So this is one of those things that doesn't get as much as attention as, say, D-Day or Pearl Harbor, but it's just as vital, okay? Now, the other thing we had, guys, yeah.
So the Suns would take out the American boat.
Yeah, the shipping, yeah.
Why did they not take out?
The destroyers? Well, it was mano a mano. You know what I mean? They're trying to take them out. We're trying to take them out. Yeah, and some of our ships are going to get destroyed too, for sure. And then we started using these aircraft. You have the Catalina and others like this that have radar on. Okay, and these are obviously flying boats. So we're going to have patrols, okay, of planes searching for submarines as well. And these can drop depth charges as well. Okay, in fact, I have a video. I'm not sure.
So radar was beginning to be utilized. By mid-1941, half of Coastal Command's patrol aircraft were thus equipped. Another effective long-range patrol flying boat entered the fight, the American PBY Catalina. One of its primary missions was to destroy surface U-boats transiting through the Bay of Biscay.
And those U-boats had to surface from time to time. Okay.
But even long-range Catalinas operating from Britain, North America, and Iceland could not provide cover for convoys in the mid-Atlantic. This gap was fully exploited by U-boats using wolfpack tactics, which decimated the convoys. By the end of 1942, losses had doubled to 5.5 million tons, or over 1,000 ships sunk. Gradually, the gap was closed with the introduction and strength of very long-range Liberator aircraft. By 1943, the tide of war had turned against the U-boat, so that it was reduced from a predatory wolf to a hunted dog. The Battle of the Atlantic was arguably the single most important one of the war. Had the U-boats won, Britain would not have been able to wage war against Germany. And leading the fight against the U-boat had been the anti-submarine airplane.
Pretty interesting there, okay? Yeah, just another picture. And then that's the picture of convoys getting ready to leave, okay? So, with this, guys, here's some numbers with it. So, between radar and sonar using destroyers and aircraft, we are eventually going to sink close to 800 German U-boats, okay? Which is the bulk of what they have. Now, the Germans are continually making new ones and so forth, just like aircraft, okay? But by the end of the war, guys, I told you this number earlier, 4,600 merchant ships were sunk in the Atlantic, okay? I mean, that's just, it's hard to, you wrap your head around that, okay? So there's a lot of debris at the bottom of the Atlantic, that's for sure, okay? Which makes good for, fishing reefs. Yes? Diving reefs and stuff like that. Nope, I don't know.
The U-boats are the Suns, right?
Yeah. Unterboten.
Yeah, these people will claim German superiority, but their main gun was called the Gewehr 47, something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
It means gun 47. Obviously not the smartest.
No, I like
ones.
this one. It's easy to remember.
Time do we get out?
35.
All right, so as I mentioned, guys, we're going to start talking about North Africa by November. Now, before that, we've got to remember our British friends, our British allies, okay, in the British Empire. The British have influence all over the world. And so as we move to North Africa and the Mediterranean, okay, now I don't know why this map doesn't have Britain up here, but it is, okay. Now, here's the thing. Stalin, by mid-1942, is being decimated by the Germans. Okay, Hitler's out there near Moscow. He's out there in Stalingrad. Okay, and Stalin is now an ally because the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And Churchill said this about Stalin. He said, if Stalin were hell incarnate itself, he would find something good to say about Stalin in comparison to Adolf Hitler. Churchill is a good judge of character. Stalin is not a good human being. You understand that. But he's fighting Hitler. So that makes him our ally. So we're going to help them. Stalin really wants us to open a front in France. That's what he's pushing the Americans and the British to do. If they open a front in France, that's going to divert attention away from the Soviet Union back to Western Europe. But Churchill is like, hey, that's a horrible idea. Been there, done that, fought the Germans in France, and we got our butts kicked, right? Just a few, 14, 15 months ago, okay? And Churchill's like, no, that's the wrong move. And besides, you Americans haven't fought anybody since World War I. And you've only fought in World War I for 200 days. The American military, Churchill's telling Roosevelt, you guys aren't ready to cross the English Channel and go into France, into the teeth of the German army. So Churchill argues to go after the soft underbelly of the beast, which is going to be this region right here, the Mediterranean and North Africa, okay? The Mediterranean is obviously very important because it gives you a path into Southern Europe this direction. Now, if you look at North Africa, you've got French Morocco. Now, the French are puppets of the Germans now, yes? Vichy France. So if you ever watched the movie Casablanca, which here's Casablanca, the Germans are there, the French are there, okay? This is French Algiers. The Italians, which are on Hitler's side, the Axis powers, control Libya. Who controls Egypt? Or who has great influence in Egypt? The British. Okay? So the British are our allies here, and the British have a lot of people in the Middle East as well. Okay? So you got Iran, Iraq over here. Okay? And so what the Germans are trying to do is move towards the Suez Canal. If they can take control of the Suez Canal and the Straits of Gibraltar, the Germans will control all traffic in and out of the Mediterranean. Okay, and this is the big deal why that ship was stuck there a couple of weeks ago in the Suez Canal. It held up traffic for, there was like 400 ships waiting to get through, okay?
How'd they get out?
And what did the ships waiting do? Like,
They just
Sat
sat
there.
yeah, but would they eat?
They just
Uber Eats.
Oh, right, I forgot.
Okay. Now,
Yeah, I'm like,
so the Germans are going to make a push. Now, remember, the Germans are out here fighting in Russia at the same time. they're going to make a push this direction. The British are going to counter. Okay, I'm going to introduce a couple people to you. General Erwin Rommel, who's the head of the Africa Corps for the Germans, and General Bernard Montgomery, or Monty, okay, who is the British 8th Army General. These two are going to meet here. Okay, now, the British were aided by Ultra, which was the attempt to break the German code, the Enigma. How many of you guys know about the Enigma? That's it? Come on. Oh my gosh. Okay. This is the Enigma machine. Okay. There's a really good movie that came out a 5 years ago called Imitation Game. Okay. And it explains how they were able to break this German code. All right. Now it's extremely complicated. All right. This machine, it looks like a typewriter. You push the letter T, it comes up as the letter K. You can imagine how you guys have taken statistics. So imagine the number of variations that you would get with 26 letters of the alphabet. Okay. And then in addition to that, there's 3 reels here that changes. So multiply that times 3 or more. I mean, it's almost impossible to figure out. So what was the guy's name? Alan Turing, okay, who's this genius from Britain. Builds, I think it's the world's first computer, right? The world's first computer to figure this out. Now, you got to have a code book to figure this out because the Germans would use a code to set all the settings of the machine, and they would change that every so often. Okay, so without knowing how the settings were, you can't figure this out. Okay, so if you're kind of interested in this stuff, the movie U-571, we've been talking about submarine warfare. The U-571 is about an American crew that poses as a German crew to try and steal or take command of a German sub to steal this machine so they could possess one. But Alan Turing figures this out. And so the British are gonna begin to know the Germans' every move. Okay, now this is something I really didn't think about until I saw the movie. And I've been teaching this a long time. If you know the Germans' every move and you show up to stop their every move, are the Germans going to know you broke their code? Yeah. So you can't show up every time and stop their every move. You following me here? Which means you're going to have to allow some of the German attacks to take place, which means people are going to die, and you could have prevented it. This is difficult decisions that people are making, okay, but they can't give it away. All right, so I do have a little video on that. Let me see what I got up here on the notes. And then I'll show you the video on the Enigma. Okay, let's write this down, and then I'll show the video at the end, okay? So, the Germans are commanded by General Erwin Rommel, okay? Any of you guys heard of this guy, know much about him? Okay. He's actually one of the most famous World War II generals that we have, okay? Now, I get this, right? We have this thing in America today where we can't celebrate Robert E. Lee because he was the general for the South. You know what I mean? We can't talk about the greatness of the man because some people feel that General Lee was a great man. Okay, he fought for the wrong cause, certainly. Okay, but when you read about General Lee, you understand that he was fighting for Virginia. That's what he believed. That's what he felt. That was his country. John Adams talked about Massachusetts as his country. It's a different time than what we live into today. Okay, but we can talk about this Nazi general and talk about how good of a general he was, tactically wise, strategy wise, without celebrating the human being. Now, if you do read and study about Rommel, guys, he's not some like Nazi that like celebrates anti-Semitism, hates Jews. He's a soldier. He's fighting for his country. He's leading his men. And he's good at it. And we can learn a lot from him as far as a commander goes. So these are, adjectives that describe Rommel. Shrewd, daring, resourceful. Talked about airplanes, learning to fly. Well, guys, in North Africa, Rommel was a pilot. He would go up in his own plane, scout the British positions from the air, himself, the general, land his plane, return to headquarters, devise a battle plan against the British, and then carry it out, not from the rear, but from the front with his men. Okay? So, if you're a soldier, that's the kind of general you want to fight for. Patton was like that. Yes. Good for morale, for sure. Okay? So I'm not, trying to celebrate a Nazi here. I'm trying to give you some military history. Okay? So, Rommel had reached El Alamein. This is about 70 miles from the Suez Canal. Monty's going to counter. Okay? And as I said, the British are aided by Ultra. They broke the code. There's a good show on Netflix. There's a place outside of London called Bletchley Park. Okay, and this is where they send all the smart people. Okay, to break the codes, like Alan Turing. But a lot of the smart people, guys, ladies, were ladies. A lot of smart women, just like you guys have seen the movie Hidden Figures, right? About the NASA missions, right? Yeah, so the British aren't stupid. They're going to employ their smart men and women, okay? And so there's a lot of really good history here about these code breakers, all right? These women. And there's a show on Netflix called Bletchley Park, and it's about these women that were code breakers during the war, and then the war's over, and now they're housewives. And so they're bored. And so they read about crimes, murders in the newspaper, and then these women get together and they solve the murder. Okay, it's pretty fascinating. British TV, you know what I mean? They have great TV. I watch all the BBC stuff. Good humor. British humor's great, guy. And good, they have good mystery stuff. Yeah. Sorry. All right. Now, so, like I said, Russia wanted us to open a front in France. We're going after the soft underbelly of the beast. Okay. All right. So here's Monty. All right. General Bernard Montgomery. Okay. Now this guy, he's our friend, but he is disliked by a lot of American generals. Okay. And I'll need to get into this a little bit, guys, about the command structure here in Europe. Does anybody know who's in charge of the entire Allied operation in Europe?
Eisenhower.
Yeah, he's a Kansan, okay? General Dwight David Eisenhower, okay? Or Ike, as we call him, okay? He's going to be the supreme Allied commander, all right? Because the Americans are going to have more troops than any other country. We're going to provide more men than any other country. More supplies, more weapons than any other country. So we're going to have an American in charge. But that doesn't mean we don't have to include our friends, the British, in some of that command structure, which to keep people happy. Yes. How is that? Well, we're a little bit late to the fight. And really, if you look at the heaviest losses, they're in the Eastern Front. It's the Russians and the Germans, right? And then the Japanese. They're going to have heavy losses as well. Part of that is their tactics, how they fought or refused to surrender. So a lot of them would die or kill themselves, which we will talk about. Okay. All right. So yeah, guys, tons of information to share with you guys here. Most of it's really interesting, so I'm running out of time. So I'll come back to this slide if anybody can remind me. Talk about the command structure. We'll watch this thing on the Enigma. Great movie to watch. Hey, next one after Enemy at the Gates, Imitation Game, guy. All right, and any of you guys, it's a really good movie. Now, Hollywood kind of does this thing. Alan Turing was gay. Okay, so that's kind of a major theme of the movie. Okay, but that's okay. You know, it's who he was. Okay, and if you're homosexual back in those days, I mean, obviously he would never been allowed to do what he did had they known he was gay. Okay, because there's such a stigma that people could easily be blackmailed. If, like, say the Germans found out he was gay, they could blackmail him. You know what I mean? Use him as a spy. Okay, so, all right. Hey, have a great day, guys.